Breaking tonight, Israel offers Hamas a 24-hour ceasefire, stating they will continue to demolish Hamas tunnels and will respond to any other fire from Gaza. Hamas rejected the offer. With me now, senior advisor to Presidents Obama, Clinton, and George H.W. Bush, and Fox News foreign affairs analyst, Ambassador Dennis Ross. It's good to have you here. Ambassador, we had a 12-hour ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. Hamas then bombs, and now they reject a 24-hour ceasefire. What is going on, and is there any chance of a ceasefire here?
Well, I do think there is a chance for a ceasefire. The question is how soon and under what conditions. From an Israeli standpoint, the critical consideration is that they have got to be able to destroy the tunnels, which really amount to being a loaded gun at their head. The tunnels are much wider, much deeper, much more expansive, much more numerous than the Israelis had understood, and they all come out in areas within Israel, in populated areas, villages, kibbutzim, and the like. So from their standpoint, this goes on until they're able to destroy the tunnels. I think Hamas itself will probably look for a way out simply because there's going to come a point where the amount of rockets they have left, they will in fact be very careful about not wanting to see all of them depleted.
Well, you know, Dennis, one of the things that appears to have taken the Israelis by surprise was the number of tunnels that are there between Gaza and Israel. How did that happen?
You know, one thing that happened clearly is that Hamas was able to build in a way that surprised the Israelis, number one. Number two, they got a lot of the material through the smuggling tunnels, but it also appears that many of the materials that were sent into Gaza to be supervised and monitored by the UN exclusively for certain kind of building, some of that probably was also diverted by Hamas for its own use, again, to build this kind of underground set of tunnels to protect their rockets, to protect their leadership, and to carry out attacks into Israel. Well,
you know, there are those who say, you know, in reference to what you just said, that, you know, President Obama had promised money for technology to Israel that would identify the building of tunnels if Israel would allow concrete, iron, cement, and ammonia to be allowed into Palestine if they lifted the ban. And what we're seeing is the result of that. It appears that that was to Israel's detriment to allow for the lifting of that ban.
Well, I think you go back to 2012 when the ceasefire was concluded and the Israelis agreed to the terms at that time. It was brokered by the United States at that time. I think the Israelis felt that the kind of safeguards that existed were sufficient at that point. Clearly now when they look at the reality they're facing, they obviously are going to take a very different view as to the kind of monitoring that would be required and who would do it on any materials that are going to go into Gaza. To be fair, at a certain level, I think the Israelis understand as well, the people of Gaza have got to be able to live. The question is, who is concerned about the welfare of the people living in Gaza? Hamas puts that in the least of their considerations. They put being able to wage war against the Israelis as their top consideration.
And what do you think, as Kerry is pushing for this truce, and you've been on the inside of meetings with presidents, what do you think it will take? If Israel says, look, we agree to a ceasefire, but only if, you know, we can continue to go after and find those tunnels, I mean, Hamas isn't going to agree to that.
I think the key, you're putting your finger, Judge, on what I think is the essential question right now. From an Israeli standpoint, they have to have sufficient time to be able to ensure that they have found and destroyed the tunnels. And these are not tunnels that, you know, are 50 meters long. These are tunnels that are several kilometers long. So it takes time to destroy these kind of tunnels. Many of them may be booby-trapped, and many of them may have ambushes built in. So it takes time, has to be done with care. I think from an Israeli standpoint, they will accept a ceasefire once they know they've been able to destroy this. They still are going to want certain assurances about not being in a position where these can be easily rebuilt. Hamas, for its part, will want, I think, to be able to point to openings of crossings, but even these don't relate only to Israel. The Rafah crossing is controlled entirely by Egypt. So at the end of the day, the key arbiter here may well be Egypt to be able to produce an outcome.
And it's interesting because Egypt was very concerned about some of those tunnels from the Sinai and protecting Egypt. And I would think that they would assist Israel as well. They tried to broker a ceasefire. Anyway, Ambassador Ross, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
My pleasure. Thank you.
All right. Joining me now, former Israeli Deputy Defense Minister Danny Danon, who joins us live from Tel Aviv. Good evening. You say Secretary of State Kerry's quote seems disconnected from reality. Why do you say that?
Good night, Judge. We see Secretary Kerry comes and goes and pushing Prime Minister for another ceasefire. And I think he lives in an imaginary world. You do not talk with the Hamas. You fight with the Hamas. You do not beg for a ceasefire. You make the Hamas to beg for a ceasefire. And you should not put Israel in the same level of the Hamas. It's like I will tell you, Judge, that the US and Al-Qaeda are in the same level. We need to fight with the Hamas, and it will take us time. They have dozens of tunnels beneath the border, and it will take us time, a week, a month, a year. As long as it takes, we need to fight with the Hamas, and Secretary Kerry should allow Israel the time to make sure we live safety, because now he's in Europe, tomorrow he will be back in Washington, but we will stay here with the Hamas, we will stay here with the tunnels. That's why I think we should be allowed to do what needs to be done with the Hamas.
And, you know, since you don't know, or Israel does not know exactly how many tunnels there are, and they say that they're like cities, some of them, we have no idea how long this is going to take, correct?
Correct. But let me ask you, Judge, if I would have told you now that there are dozens of tunnels coming from Mexico into Arizona and Al-Qaeda forces are getting ready to attack U.S. cities, what you would have said? As long as it takes, we will take care of it. And that's what we are telling now to the Prime Minister. Do the right work with the Hamas. Fight with the Hamas as long as it takes. Otherwise, we will see the Hamas taking over Jewish communities, kidnapping kids back into Gaza.
All right. And what do you say to those who say, you know, the killing of civilians is occurring as a result of what Israel is doing? I mean, I know you're going to say that, you know, Hamas is putting their military, their munitions or whatever in civilian areas. But how do you justify that?
I think I don't need to justify it. Everybody knows it's clear. Look only at the last 24 hours. We accepted a humanitarian ceasefire because there is a Muslim holiday, Eid al-Fitr, but they are not accepting it. We opened a field hospital in the border with Gaza to help the Palestinians who were wounded, and the Hamas is shelling the same hospital. I don't think we justify, and everybody knows that the Hamas is using its own people. It is a pity, but they are captured by the Hamas, and we have to protect ourselves.
And you say you can't trust the international community, especially since the missiles are found in the UN schools in Gaza, and then Hamas ends up with more missiles. Where are they getting these missiles from?
Well, frankly speaking, the UN is a joke, Judge. They are condemning Israel, and at the same time, we look what's happening in their own facilities, in schools, in UN facilities. They're hiding the missiles. For years, they took missiles from Sinai, they smuggled them. And you know, Judge, we left Gaza 9 years ago. There is no Jewish communities, no settlement. And in the last 9 years, the only thing they did, they were ready for the next conflict. And instead of building a society like a Singapore, they made it into Afghanistan in the Middle East. And we have to realize that after we will end this conflict, they will get ready for the next conflict. That's why we have to work and do the military work as we speak.
Okay, so are you saying that the UN is complicit with Hamas and corrupt, or are you saying that the UN is just inept?
I think they are incapable. They want to have a ceasefire, they want to have a peace in the region, but they are not connected to the reality. They will go back to New York, to the UN building. They will have another session, another committee. Probably they will condemn us again. We know about that. But in terms of fighting with the Hamas, not allowing them using the cement for tunnels, not allowing them using the metal for missiles, they are not capable of doing it.
Very quickly now, what do you want from the international community?
I think they have to make it very clear that we cannot continue like that. We cannot continue in a situation that there will be more rockets in Gaza and more tunnels, attack tunnels against Israel. I think we should look at Syria and to see what happened in Syria when we were able to take out the chemical weapon. We need to do the same with Gaza, but you need to put pressure.
All right.
Secretary Kerry is not putting the pressure now.
All
you
right,
need to put
Danny.
more pressure in order of it to happen.
All right, Danny Danon, always good to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge.
All right. And coming up, you know how I feel about the immigration crisis, but now new evidence that cartels and gangs are using this crisis to continue their drug operation in the United States. That's next.